The weird part, especially with like this, I guess for me, it's like a new idea of what a relationship is. Like for me, my sort of idea is like, well, I could just choose to not have a relationship with my mom, to just not have a relationship with Alvin, and that's the way that I can just choose to go about it in the future. Even though these people are kind of they're like tied to me, not permanently, but I think you get where I'm coming from. And I think the weird part about that is like, okay, so all of these people who have sort of like different ideologies than me, how do I go about not establishing a relationship with the people who I do have a relationship with in some way? How do I like move forward with like I'm not trying to say that you want to trick or like falsify something, but really explaining my different worldview to them in a way where I'm trying to say like, oh, here's where I'm coming from, so that you understand. But at the same time, to me, that it feels like that's not worthwhile, because like that's extra work that I have to do, and it's just easier to say like, I'm just gonna not have a relationship with you at all. We don't need to talk or like do anything, and then it's just easier that way, so we can just go along with our like separate worldviews, which is kind of the way that I feel even about like my mother and brother, or like just so like the moms. Just it's so many people for me who I feel like are in that bucket right now. Like I don't want to explain it.
What do you feel like you gain, and what do you feel like you lose out of taking that position?
I feel like I gained space to like do other things with that energy, but I feel like I possibly like lose the ability to understand their worldview. Like there's some reason that their worldview is different than mine. By engaging with them, I'd be able to understand. But I feel like when I tried to engage with them, it was like a dismissiveness, kind of like. There was something I actually heard that was to me, I thought it was interesting. Like I'm not sure, but you might have heard of like Candace Owens. Do you know? You know who she is? She's like a black conservative commentary.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and she basically she had a conversation about how no other race promotes their criminals. So she was talking about how George Floyd had a criminal history, and wondering like why people are like considering him a hero in some way and putting him on a pedestal when he's just a criminal. And I thought that was interesting. But it also felt very much like she was also basically saying like how other societies, other communities, to me what she was describing was like groupthink, where it's like people decide, here are the upstanding citizens, here are people who are doing well, let's promote them, let's all clap for them. This one person, he's doing poorly, so let's just eliminate him, let's just forget about him. And it was kind of like, to me, it felt like this weird like duality, because there's no person who's like all good, and there's no person who's like all bad. So in either case, you're just like almost choosing to acknowledge positive things that one is doing, and then ignore the negative things that they're doing in order to like paint them as a good person.
Yeah, I guess I also feel when I hear that, there's kind of an immediate, like, I don't know, I think that white privileged society uplifts their criminals all the time. Like, I think that a lot of bankers and politicians and the housing market crash and Freddie Mae and Freddie Mac and all of the people that are involved in resource development and oil tycoons
that's another take, right? And I'm not sure. I'm not even sure how to like move forward in that conversation, because I feel like one part of it is kind of like it's like politics and power, right? It's like there's these resources, and some people have the resources and some people don't. And like maybe the whole game is like Monopoly, right? Where it's like some people just want all of the resources, and actually they have them all, and the other people just have nothing, right? And everyone else is like an indefinite renter, right? And that's kind of like the way it is. But when you're talking about that power extending so far into like really the livelihood though of other humans, like people are not able to like live. That's literally the conversation that we're having now. It's not a metaphor anymore. It's like very, very real. And even when I think about myself, like in my position, like right now with like the court, with just like how easy it was for Alvin to like really walk into court with like nothing. He just can like make a claim, but he's not even like a white person. And or even if I think about certain like little snark remarks, I don't even know who these people were, because there was like one commissioner on my case, but then there was like some other person. I don't know who he was, but he was making some snark comment about how like she couldn't work at Microsoft or something, like basically making a joke out of it. That was like the first time I was in court, and it was just kind of like, I guess wow, like there's so many other things that are at play before I even step into the room. It's like once I'm even getting here, it's like where I don't know how to describe really where I'm starting from, but I know where I am now, and this could not possibly be what justice looks like.
Yeah. I mean, it's still, in some ways, sure, maybe for you too, but in some ways it still feels a little unclear, like, what happened there?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the confusing thing about equality or justice, is that it's not what it is by definition, and so it becomes very confusing and isolating, and right, and sort of what you've experienced, it becomes kind of maddening. You know what's being experienced in the world right now, it's maddening.
One other thing that does feel strange is like there also, I feel like, and maybe it's a weird thing for me to be saying, but like kind of like an overhype of like social justice warriors, in a sense. Like I've heard that many times from like conservatives, but I feel like I didn't understand what they were saying, and I feel like I'm finally starting to see it, right? Because what people are being critical of, like Amy Klobuchar, right? And it's kind of like people are talking about stuff that she did and said 10, 15 years ago, you know? It's like almost like you do one thing that's wrong, and all of a sudden like you have no potential to like go in like this other it's like when you're born, you pick a path and you just stay on that path for like your whole life, and it feels like this, like I feel like so many people are just devoid of the ability to critically think. Like just critically think, like really like look at the info. It was like I had to basically tell someone who was pretty senior to me. He was making a comment about like the black community, and I was like, you do realize, I was like, you're a computer scientist, like you can critically think. You do know the black community is not a monolith. Like we don't all feel the same way. Because he basically made this like statement that was like, the black community disagrees with Killer Mike, and I was like, well, okay. And like someone else, like another black woman, ended up sharing a statement that basically said that, and I was like, do you just blanketly agree with her? Like this is clearly, because he was like basically retracting his like support of the statement that Killer Mike gave, and I was just like, that is actually really strange to hear from you. To really hear from anybody who has like their own opinion, right? Like the whole point is like some information comes and then you're like, huh, okay, well let me like figure this out for myself, and then you like contextualize and you try to like understand for yourself what it means, right? Like you'll never do that with only one side, with only one opinion, with only one piece of evidence. Like that doesn't work. This is not how like life works, right?
Yeah, that's quite a statement.
Which
yeah,
one?
That's quite the Black community, you know.
Oh, right.
Colloquial Black community, whatever that means. I couldn't even begin to imagine what that means.
Yeah, but I also it just became. I think it's like a layered statement, right? Because it says so much. It's like, hey, white people who don't know any Black people at all and who basically have no idea what these like alien people are thinking. Like, here's one representative. Like, here's we got like a little radio feed of like what's going on in that micro community, and here it is. It's like, well, like wow, that's it's like it just really became even more clear. Like, this conversation needs to continue. I'm glad it started. I guess, you know, wherever it started, even if it's there, you know, it's like open the floodgates, because like this conversation for sure needs to go further. It was just interesting. That's like the thing that strikes me. It's just really, really interesting. So yeah.
I have a feeling, but yeah, tell me a little more about what's so interesting about it to you.
Just like hearing it, like there's no. I guess maybe it's also coming off. And I started to have a moment of self-reflection, right? Because maybe I've also spoken about like white people as like a monolith, like they're all the same. It's kind of like that's really unfair. But then if you start to think about privilege in this country, it's just like certain policies have affected groups of people. So then it's like you can't really talk about the privilege without talking about actually the whole group. Like everyone in the group, in terms of like legislation, had access to these privileges, and like this group did not have access. But we're talking about like laws here, right? So everyone's feelings on the laws, okay, that's one thing, but then who actually had access to the resource and then who didn't, that's like a different conversation. So I feel like it's really important to contextualize that, to say like, okay, well, you're the person with the resource and this is what you said and how you feel. So in relation to whatever like the topic is at hand, especially when I'm thinking specifically about like this like research community that I feel like I'm a member of and like participate in, that particular community has just been there's no people virtually who look like me who are in that space, right? So like all these people have been like growing the field for years and years and years, and they all like know each other, and they've all been, you know, intermingling with each other. And it wasn't until like maybe 2 years ago that really anyone like me even like virtually started to like enter the space. So, you know, they've been growing, they've all been around for 40 years. Like just the people who are like in really high positions now, they've been like growing together for 30 or 40 years. And so, you know, it's like we weren't a part of that conversation like at all. And I don't even think it was like they were sitting there like, let's exclude them. It's just like we literally weren't there. So like they didn't even have the opportunity to start to like engage with like our perspectives. And so maybe it's not like a willful ignorance, but it's like ignorance nonetheless. So
yeah, again, I mean, I hear that, and I also it feels to me also that the absence of presence, the like not being there, says so much about, you know, the systemic, the way that the opportunities are outsourced.
Yeah.
You know, so I feel like the non-presence really speaks loud to me in that situation. And it would take to sort of be open to the like, there's an issue here. There's a misrepresentation. What's going on?
So people
to feel that loss,
Right. How would you classify them, or how would you talk about people who don't feel that loss? Like, who basically don't acknowledge, like, maybe they notice, like, our group is very homogenous, but they don't have really any solutions toward, like, making it other. And yeah, like, how?
I don't know. I mean, I guess the first thing that comes up is that feels like internalized culturalization or racism or, classism, to not even be trained to like see that, like, I think there's a particular culture that's not, that it's like if you're, I think there's that old proverb, like, if you've never seen a ship before and you're standing on the beach and the ship passes in front of you, you're not going to see the ship.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like you don't even really know how to identify the ship because you've never seen the ship before. So how would you know how to materialize it?
Right.
Where once somebody says, that's a ship, it's a boat, it does this and this and this, then you can't not see it in your view. But until you learn how to train your eye to see it, you just don't see it.
Okay, that's another thing though that becomes problematic for me, because I feel like it's a way that, at least what I feel like, my mom and brother can be dismissive and just say like, Olivia's crazy, because like we've heard crazy and then I pointed to it and I called it crazy. Now we know what it looks like.
Why don't you ask them why they think you're crazy?
I feel like my brother wants to have the conversation, and I don't think my mom has the vocabulary to talk about it. So I don't know how useful it is, because I feel like I've tried to do that.
Well, and that's hard, right? Because it's, I hear you, and I really like, I hear your stance over and over again of like, how hard do I want to work to be seen? It's like you have so much going on. Is that really where you need to put in your energy? And yet there's still these questions of like, at least I as the other in the room, feel the like, well, does your brother want to be in a relationship with you? Or like, what does he think about that? And, like, why doesn't he want to have that conversation? Is it too painful? Like, I have, of course, a lot of questions that maybe you have those questions and I'm holding them for you. And that's why they're coming up for me. But yeah, there's a lot of curiosity there that feels a little bit more like there's something more alive there than just the plain, I don't want to have this conversation, that doesn't feel real.
I feel like, and this is something actually I had to like grow out of, like growing up, anytime if I'd ask my mom a question, she would say things like, don't be a smart ass, or like, watch your smart mouth, things like that. It's not just like her, it's actually very common in like the Black community, where like asking questions is like talking back, which is seen as like negative. So it's like, to be inquisitive is like a negative thing, and I think so many people have been like indoctrinated to like do that, and I think my brother has as well, where like he doesn't feel the autonomy to like question authority. So if someone tells him like, here's what a crazy person looks like, and then points to it, he'll be like, got it, without like ever questioning it or like thinking about for himself like what it means, because I've seen him do that on multiple occasions. And maybe I'm doing that too, right? But I actually no, I have, because I feel like I've seen it multiple.
Have you ever seen your brother be crazy? Like, have you ever seen like what's happened for him in his life? Is his life just so not made mistakes, or has he never gotten into trouble? Like, what's going on for him?
Well, no, not like my brother was, and still is like, he's like a recovering drug addict.
Okay, so would you not maybe would some group of people might classify that as crazy?
I mean,
what kind of drugs was he using?
I think heroin or cocaine, maybe. I don't know.
You know, so certainly you could use words like that classifies somebody who's out of control, that classifies somebody who's unstable, that classifies somebody who's in pain, that classifies somebody who's covering something up. I mean, there's lots of words you can throw around, but you know, it's like for you, something that you come forward with a lot, like you have this sort of desire to understand humanity and wholeness, where it's like, you know, that somebody using drugs doesn't say the whole thing. That's not the whole picture, right?
Right.
Like why somebody chooses or gets involved with or engages in an addiction with drugs is multi-layered and very complex.
Right.
Right.
That's definitely the way that I feel. Like, yeah.
Right. But from a person who, you know, was shut off to understanding the pain, or didn't have compassion, or didn't want to, might just say, oh, well, you're a fucking drug addict. That's your bubble. Go live in your bubble. Go live in your square. Drug addict. Right? And that's crazy making. That's hurtful. And so it's like, why is he doing this thing to you where you had this experience of, you know, temporary instability, or you were, you know, had to go be in the hospital for a while, and you know, you're in this experience. And so it's like, what about that all of a sudden is for him that's like, well, yeah, you need to live in your bubble of crazy. Like, what is that lack of, you know, understanding the complexity of it, especially since he's had his own experience?
I think it's a lot about like reinforcement, though, right? I feel like there's, and this is, he started to like describe this in our last conversation, where it's like other people viewed this, and so when other people said this, and so it's like he's going along with like this narrative of someone else. Like, I don't know who these people are because he didn't get into it, but you know, it was like, well, you know, like, yeah, it really feels like a community enforcement, where it's like, I know a crazy person too, me too. Like, all these people know what a crazy person is. So then they're like, I get it. You don't even have to like explain to, like, I know. But I also feel like it was something that kind of came up for me that was interesting. One of the people who run this like People's Breakfast, they started a bail fund for protesters, and they basically started mentioning how so often police officers declare people insane when they refuse to comply with when they can't put them in jail. So instead of putting them in jail, they put them in mental hospitals. I wasn't able to like break this down, but in the Malcolm X movie, his mother was like, she was a very fair-skinned woman, but she was like a political, I don't even know if she was like a political activist or anything, but she was married to a very dark-skinned black man. She was a black woman, and they were living in a racist part of town where the Klan was present, and because Malcolm X was like, I don't know, yeah, his father was a preacher, so this is when he was a child, so he had like, it looks like 4 or 5 siblings, and basically what happened is the Klan ends up like killing his father, and they like dump him on a railroad, and he gets run over by a train. And so the autopsy report claims that like he committed suicide, but all the evidence, like he was like knocked in the back of the head with a hammer, and it was like he made his way to a railroad track to like, it just didn't make any sense. So she goes to try to fill out to get the insurance claim for the life insurance, and they're like, the policy is null and void if it's suicide. It's right here, ma'am. And she's like, that doesn't make sense. He didn't commit suicide, right? Anyway, so she ends up having to like find work as like a house cleaner to like take care of her 5 children. And the social worker comes in and says, I'm sorry, ma'am, like we're gonna have to take these children away because like you don't have the means to take care of the children. And so they put the children all in like different foster homes, and then they put her. She goes into a mental institution, and he like he talks about that like very briefly, but there was nothing about his mother that was like that she was to me. All of the instances that I saw, like I'm not seeing. I don't even want to use the word crazy anymore. She didn't seem unstable, but it did seem like she was in a very like fucked up situation, like battling racism, and there like she did not have many allies. It did feel like the government was like actually against her, and she lost her children. This is the same thing. I remember when I was explaining to you the story of Quincy Jones and his mother. But it's like this. I saw it again, and there was some movie that Diana Ross played. She was playing some singer. I can't remember. But at the end, toward the end of the movie, I can't remember what she did. So she was in this woman that Diana Ross is playing this woman in a movie, and the woman and the character in the movie, but she's like a real entertainer. I think she goes to perform in some nightclub or something, but it was like illegal, right, for her to perform there. And so it was like years after she did it, they like arrested her for it. So they put her in jail, and she was just so shocked that she was like in jail that happened. And they like she kept like questioning the guards and stuff, and it basically this resulted in her becoming like crazy too, right? But she was in like. They put her in solitary confinement for like 3 weeks. So then, like her husband, who's also like some entertainer, like comes to visit her while she's like in the. I don't know if it was like in jail or if they moved her like to a mental hospital, but it's like this theme that I feel like I've seen quite a few times now, where it's like there's these Black women who are under immense pressure, like their actual like life situations are very complicated, and instead of like providing like some resources for them to like overcome these structural barriers, I don't know how else to describe them, everyone is like calling them crazy, and they're actually going what's known as like crazy.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about this because there's also this sort of history of I also like I want to stay in the lane of like Black women, but I think it also might be interesting for you to know that there's like a history too with the systemic sort of oppression of women, including white women, where there was this whole sort of hysteria and histrionic identification of women, where women were being abused or oppressed, or and they cracked under the pressure.
Right.
And then they got labeled as histrionic or crazy, and they got maltreated as a result of that, and it created this problem that became worse. And then the people who were in charge got to see these people are crazy, and I think that's part of this whole systemic issue of classism and racism and the top down, and the way things work is to elongate the privilege from the unprivileged by actually creating such intense psychosocial stressors for the underprivileged that it becomes impossible for the spirit to move out of that experience, to rise above it. That's why it's not just like, it's so much more than just laws or opportunities or money. It's very real mental abuse, right? And there has to be some compassion
information about that? I've never.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure which resources would be good, but yeah, there's might be Sigmund Freud was famous for sort of creating this irrational woman archetype.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it would be interesting for you to just feel into that more.
Are there any like sociologists or that kind of like talk about this? Anyone I could?
Yeah, let me think about it.
Okay, cool.
I know that there's I'm not very familiar with it, and I wanted to like become. I do have a book recommendation for you. I have it written down somewhere. Let me find it before I misspeak.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's on the archetype of the Black superwoman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I haven't read the book myself, but there was a great